Welcome to the Farm Station Podcast, where we focus on getting started on homesteading, growing, and living the sustainable dream. I'm your host, Wendy Literal. Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. It is, well, at least it's morning here. I don't know about you all, but I can't wake up anything past 6:30 anymore. It's like my kids have set me up so that my schedule, even on the weekends, starts at 6:30. And I miss the days where I could sleep till like 11. It was wonderful. But now I'm programmed and I get up and I do chores and I do all kinds of things, which I guess isn't too far off from growing a homestead, because sometimes you just got to get out before the sun wakes up because it is hot here. We live in Fredericksburg, which is just below the DC line, like maybe an hour or so. Okay, with traffic, it's like an hour and a half. And it has been getting so hot here. And it's not even like temperature-wise high enough to be a problem. It's just, I don't know, the humidity is so bad here. And it's just creates a lot of bad hair days. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's topic is what is homesteading and how to start homesteading. As many of you know, like we bought this 1 acre property, like it's on the outskirts of Fredericksburg, and it is in like a community, but we're in a community of like people have anywhere between like 3 to 5 acres, and some people have like 1 acre, but like it's a massive community, but it's like the next house is really far away. But that's the whole community is set up that way. And there's no restrictions, and it's wonderful and it's great. But we bought it because it is a stone's throw, like outside this community is our kid's school. And it's wonderful because it's like she'll be in that location because the middle school is right behind it. And we're here for like the next 10 years at least, and don't have to worry about like changing our situation or whatever. And there's a creek that goes through the backyard. Really, it's like a storm drain off, but it houses a whole bunch of like natural life and everything. It's a really cool place. We were really, really lucky to find it. But without having any restrictions on this property, we were kind of looking at it like, well, maybe this could be like our starter homestead area, because eventually the goal is to move out and get like a true farm, or estate or whatever you want to call it. Like the problem, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is that the problem with these terms is that a lot of them seem to be interchangeable, and they are and they aren't, but people use them in language back and forth. So I wanted to define it today, and kind of talk about what a homestead is, how to get started, and how we were actually kind of homesteading back when we lived up in like Northern Virginia, like when we had our townhouse and living like just outside DC. Like, it was, we didn't have animals because we couldn't, but we had started gardening, we had started learning about canning, we had started that process. And kind of what I wanted to talk about today was just what is it? What is considered homesteading? And then how you can take it and apply it to your situation, your life, because really you could homestead in an apartment if you wanted to. Seriously, legitimately. You don't have to have livestock. You don't have to have all these things. And I think that's this big misconception, is that people, want to live this dream, and that's great. But sometimes you have to mold your situation to your life. And my life right now is I've got 2 kids that, need to be close to a school, that have friends and are established here. And, picking up and going to a farm may not be the best solution. It would be fun. It would be wonderful. I'd really like it. But, our 9-to-5 jobs require an internet connection, frankly, so we have to have access to our IT world, because I'm a website programmer by day, and my husband is a network engineer. Those things require the internet, so, like I can work from home, he can't, but having the access to that information. We chose this house specifically because it had Verizon, high-speed internet to it. And by high-speed internet, I mean like the super high-speed internet. Like, it's a crazy number. I can't remember what it is. It's like a gig up and a gig down or something. It's it's pretty awesome. But we specifically, when we were house hunting, we would not look at houses that didn't have Verizon because Comcast sucks. Um, and we wouldn't look at ones that didn't have access to the higher internet speeds. So, I mean, like, that was a thing. Like, we had to have that, you know. I work from home. I have to have a reliable internet connection, and resetting the router constantly with Cox or Comcast was just not going to be an option. So what I'm getting at is that, you know, we chose this property based on our current situation, our current life, and that's what I'm going to encourage you to do for your situation. Choose where you gotta live, you know. Work towards that eventual dream, but homesteading can start right where you're at. It really can. So, and that's what we have done. So let me get into it. Homesteading. So technically it is the practice of working your own space or property to provide the most of your daily needs. I don't think that definition is the best, but it's kind of a place to start, right? And I'm sorry, I do have a cold this morning. I'll try not to sniffle and cough too much. So homesteading, and I watch a lot of different YouTube channels, and one of the ones that I have been watching when I was researching to do this podcast was Patera. Patera, I think it's like Appalachian Homestead is the official name, and Patera is her name. And she said that homesteading is a skill set. And I couldn't agree with her more. It really is. It's it all comes down to skill set. Because when we were living in Northern Virginia, I started learning about preserving the things that we were growing. We only had I think it was 2 or 3 raised beds in our townhouse's backyard. Like, it wasn't much at all. But we had an abundance. We had a ton of tomatoes, a ton of tomatoes. And a couple other little things. We didn't grow big things like squash or zucchini, but I did grow an artichoke, and it was the first time I'd ever grown an artichoke, and I was so excited. And one of the main things you can learn when you're just trying to, you know, live the lifestyle, even if you're stuck someplace that maybe isn't your ideal, is things like gardening. Learning how to garden has been a several years adventure for me. This was the first year after having had my own space and my own garden for, I don't know, about 4 years. This is let's say this is the 4th year. This is the first time that I've planted with any kind of confidence, you know, like I knew what I wanted to plant. I knew what my family would eat. Like, I had a schedule, like things were in place. But it took this long for it to happen. I killed so many plants those first several years. Like, tomatoes, thankfully, can be forgiving. But the only tomato plant that really flourished when we lived there was the cherry tomatoes. We were happy because we love cherry tomatoes, but I think we got enough to preserve or make pasta sauce out of, I don't know, maybe 3 jars or something. It wasn't much, but you know, it was kind of trial by fire. I put stuff out there and hoped I could get it to work, you know, and it did. Not great, but it did, you know. And this year I can already tell you, the first year we moved here, we planted a whole bunch of, I wanted to plant all the things, right? Because it was the first time that we'd had a whole bunch of space. I was just, yeah, I was going to get I take that back. The first year we were here, I was 8 months pregnant, and there was no way I was planting anything outside. It was hot. I was miserable. I wasn't doing it. But I did do some container gardening on the porch, and I planted mainly tomatoes and peppers. And I would go out and water in the morning, and then I wouldn't leave the house the entire day. And then that was it. That's all I wanted to do. I was huge. But I learned about hornworms that first year. I'd never seen a hornworm before. We didn't have them when we lived up in Aldi, just outside DC. We didn't have that. And we were just lucky because those suckers are everywhere. But it was I came out one morning and all my tomato plants were like sticks. And I'm like, what's going on? For those of you who don't know, a hornworm is this worm that is the exact same color of your tomato plant. And it is like a ninja at hiding on on these plants, even when they're huge. Like they start out super small and then they get pretty big. But even when they are big, they are literally the exact same color as the stems and the leaves of your tomato plant, which makes them nearly impossible to find. So it's like the first thing you learn about when you're gardening, and it is a miserable experience, I swear. It is so disappointing to come out the next morning and it looks like somebody has just de-leafed every single thing that you have. But yeah, so it was the first year here, and so even, you know, extremely pregnant and not wanting to do much of anything, certainly didn't have a raised bed garden, certainly didn't do anything with a front yard, nothing, just these containers on the deck. I still advanced my knowledge about gardening. And that is kind of what you have to do. You have to start with something, anything. Go get one tomato plant, go get one cucumber plant, go get, and when you go, ask the garden center person, which is the one that is most likely to survive. Because when you're learning, there's so many factors that go into making a plant do well that you kind of want the one that's got the highest level of forgiveness, the easiest learning curve, because even with those, you're still going to run into things that you never knew about. Watering, over and under watering. Like you can underwater a plant, you can drown a plant, surprise. That water doesn't just always go away, even in the ground, you can give a plant too much sun. Plants can get sunburned. That was a fun fact to learn. You can, and that's not even including pests and diseases and yeah, plants can get diseases from the soil. And it's not generally just from the roots. They can get bacteria that gets the rainfalls and splashes that bacteria that's on the top of the soil up onto the leaves of the plant, and then the plant can get sick. That's a thing too. So I think I hear a little kid. I think one of my kids woke up. So that's a thing too. And you can pull your hair out, or you can just start with something reasonable and, start a container garden and just commit to watering those containers all the time, or create a wicking container. And so you don't have to water it constantly if you think you're going to be forgetful. I certainly was. So yeah, that kind of comes down to just do what you can do where you're at. And it is a little bit of hoping for the best, because you never really know what your outcome's going to be with these things. Because when you start with, the tomato plant or the cucumber plant, or in my case, the artichoke plant, you just kind of got to do what you can do. What am I trying to say? You got to start with something, and it doesn't matter really what plant you get, because all plants are going to have something. And what you learn from one plant, you can transfer to another. You might learn tomato plants have got, roots that go all the way at the stems, and other plants don't have that. But what you'll also learn from the tomato is that, you've got to do this to get the, you got to make sure you move the blooms around so that they will self-pollinate themselves. Versus another plant where you've got to have or you've got to make sure that there's pollinators around to pollinate this other kind of plant. Those are the things you're just going to learn through osmosis by doing it, right? They're just things you're going to pick up along the way. And yes, you can read a book and it will help prepare you, but nothing is going to replace just doing it. And as you learn certain things about soil about one plant, you'll be able to take those and apply it to another plant. The new plant might have different specs for what it wants, but it's going to be the same process of being okay, what are the needs? How do I go fulfill those needs? Okay. It's just how much of what is going to change, because it's a different kind of plant. So those are the things you're going to learn. And then when you talk about harvesting, how do you store your stuff? Do you, when you store squash, how are you supposed to store it? When you store potatoes, how are you supposed to store it? You can read about those things, but it won't click. It won't stick with you until you do it. So just do with what you can, because what you learn about storing one thing, you can probably apply to another, and just build on that information, and you can make sure that you have a certain place set apart in your pantry for things that are going to need dry storage or things that need to be canning. You can accumulate the canning tools, because there are tools that go along with canning, not just the jars, but the jar lids, the jar, with different kinds of lids, those are the things that you can watch videos on and learn about now, because when you go to your homestead, believe me, you're going to have enough to learn when you get there, so it's just knowing the stuff you can learn now, especially by doing, is going to really help you, because you won't have to worry about that when you get where you're going, because you're going to be plenty busy when you get there. So one thing you need to ask yourself is, why are you into homesteading? Like, is it, just something that has sparked your interest, or is it like, what is it about it that makes you happy about it? Is it that you don't have, like, things are getting really, jumpy politically and you're worried about it, or are things getting, do you not have job security, or do you just don't want to be around people, which is kind of our thing. We like people, but we do not like crowds, and we do not like, a whole bunch of people up in our space, which is ironic, because my ultimate dream is to own a farm where it's like a holiday farm. It's what I've always wanted, to be able to sell pumpkins and Christmas trees and have festivals and things like that. But when I envision that like on the other end of 100 acres, because at the end of the day, I'm very much an introvert and I want to go be away and be by myself, go lock myself up in my house, so it's just, you got to look at why you want to do something, and then, be honest with yourself. If this is just something that sparks your interest because it's so out there, it's such a weird thing, then that's fine. It's your hobby. It's your thing, or is it something that you're more interested in, as being a lifestyle? Figure out where you are on that random spectrum. And then that will help you establish your goals too. Because if you're super serious and you want to go live off in the mountains, and you want to be able to, do foraging, and you want to be able to to raise livestock, those are things you can learn about now and get super serious about learning. But if this is more of just an interest to you, like a hobby, you have no interest in leaving suburbia, and that's fine, because for a long time we didn't either, so figure out where you're at and what part of this you want to pick and choose from. It's if your eventual goal is to be 100% homesteader, great. That's going to change how you decide to, pursue things. It helps you with your goal setting to know how serious you are and how much of this you really want to take on, so, but knowing the reason that you want to get into it is super important. One thing that I do want to, because and Patera did mention this in hers, Doug and Stacy didn't really mention this in theirs, and some of the websites I've read, and I'm a huge researcher, and I do put a lot of my stuff into, not a lot of my stuff, I put all of my resources and my sourcing and everything on the website. So if you want to learn more about where I get this information from and what I'm talking about, go to the website that's associated, or to the link that's associated with this podcast. It will be in the show notes. Everything is in the show notes. I am a crazy researcher. I usually make a Google Doc and just write out everything, and you'll have access to that if you go to the website. One of the main things that I read about was is prepping. Everybody made an inference to prepping, and for those that don't know, prepping is preparing for the end of days, so making sure that you have enough food to last you however many months, having the skill set to grow your own food, because there's going to be a food crisis, or the climate change is destroying the world, so we need to have X, Y, and Z lined up, storing stuff in the basement. Some people do, they buy giant packs of seeds so that they can have food security in the future, because they'll have these seeds that they can grow a variety of different things. The seed thing specifically, I don't really agree with, because seeds go bad. They don't last forever. And I guess the ones that the better ones, they store their seeds in like specialty like moisture packs, so that they probably would last longer. But even then, the longer a seed is around, the harder it is for it to germinate. So, but that's getting back to the point. The prepping is a different mindset than homesteading, because prepping is preparing yourself for a catastrophe, for like an Armageddon, right? And that is taken with a different seriousness than homesteading. Homesteading is, promoting a lifestyle and the problem is that it's not a problem, but like the issue is that it's a lot of the same skill sets. So people look at homesteaders sometimes as preppers, and they're not thinking the world is going to end. They just want to know how to, maybe they don't like the mainstream products, for example, like maybe their skin is sensitive and they don't want to use, the stuff that they can get at Target, like sometimes that is what promotes a homesteader, is because they want to grow their own things so that they know where their food comes from. And that's all there is to it. A prepper takes it one step further and, makes it so that they have a supply of food for 6 months instead of maybe the winter. Like that's the difference. It's a much more extreme version of it. But they do have a lot of the same skill sets, which is kind of why people look at them as the same thing. Other things that you can kind of get started with, a lot of people start with herbs. I know this is kind of jumping back into like a previous topic, but herbs, learning recipes, starting with, like I said, tomatoes, cucumbers, and, making sure you start with the easiest plants. Gardening, canning, learning how to build raised beds, which they're not complicated, but again, you're going to want to customize them for your situation. Do you want them to be low, or do you want them to be high? Are you, how long do you want them to last? Are you okay with them falling apart in 5 years or 10 years? Or do you want them to last like to the rest of your life? Like it determines what you build them out of. It determines like anything, like there's a million different ways to do it. Are you a container gardener? Are you a in-ground gardener? Do you want to grow fruit trees? Do you want to grow, what are the things? Oh, this is a good one. Log down what are the things that your family eats. And the reason that's important is because, for example, like the first year I gardened here, like I really gardened, like I had my raised beds, I was gardening, I grew about 1 billion different things. And, some are more successful than others. And that was a nice little learning curve too. But what ended up happening is that I ended up with produce of things that we would not eat. Like just stuff that was just not of interest to us, like, oh, cool, look at this really neat thing that I grew, and then it would just go into the fridge and rot because nobody wanted it, There were a couple kinds of squash that were like that. Just random thing. Eggplant was one of them. It's a neat looking plant, but nobody wanted to eat it. Nobody, like we tried a bunch of different ways to make it, and it just didn't do it for us. Like it was just tasting like air all the time. It wasn't good. We grew kale, found out we did not like kale. I tried making kale chips. I tried putting it in salads. I tried everything. I tried basically using it like spinach. I should have just grown spinach. We like spinach. I should have just grown spinach, but that was a learning curve, right? Like I learned the things that my family would eat and the things that my family wouldn't eat. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try growing new things. It just means be realistic. What are the things you go to the grocery store and buy? Grow those things. You will be much happier camper, and then make a list of them so you remember them for the next year, Logging is another really good homesteading skill. I just went to Target, that's like my store, and I got a journal, and in that journal it's just a plain journal, just regular pages, and I just started writing down everything I was doing. I have referred to that sucker like 1 million times since the season started. And you can do like an electronic version like Google Docs or whatever, but the problem with those is that it's hard to read your phone out in the garden. sometimes because of the sun, it just gets on the screen and it's hard to read. You can always read a piece of paper. So having like a pen and your journal with you, if you got to write down something, it's there. It's there. And yeah, it can get damaged, and parts of my journal have gotten damaged, like water spills on it or whatever, but you just let it dry, and then you have crinkly pages and it's fine, but just, especially if you get too far away from the Wi-Fi signal at the house, sometimes the phone freaks out on you and it won't let you do the things you want to do, especially if you're writing to an online app like Google Docs, So those are just kind of things to keep in mind. Like having the logging journal is extremely helpful. Starting with skill sets that you have access to right now is extremely important. And I coming back to Patera, like I honestly, like it's a really good video to watch, and I will link it in the show notes. But it really does. She's right. It comes down to skill sets. Homesteading is skills, and then you take those skills and you apply them to your situation, whether you live in an apartment or you live out in the boonies. It's just, that's what's going to determine your success, is your personal skills. And that's, even though homesteading is a lifestyle, it is a lifestyle made up of skills. It's not like living the fabulous lifestyle in Hollywood or something. It's a different set of skills. You have to know how to help yourself survive. You have to be able to recognize which mushrooms are good to eat, not to eat. If you're going to include foraging as one of your skills, you have to be able to know, how to raise a piglet to a full-size pig, if that is going to be one of your skills. Having livestock or having poultry, having chickens, that's a whole skill set. And hopefully we'll be adding that skill set to our lineup here pretty soon. But it all comes down to doing what you can where you're at, and hoping for the best. It's just like anything. Even in school, you're going to fall on your face, expect it, and don't beat yourself up too bad about it, but do learn from it. If your tomato plant is drooping over for no apparent reason, get on a Facebook gardening group. There's a million of them, and there's probably one for your local area. I'm certainly in one here from Fredericksburg Gardeners, and it's a great little group. And the thing about gardening I found is that it's something that really brings people together. So people that enjoy this same hobby, everybody knows a little bit about something. So if you have a problem, take a picture of it, post it up on that group, and I guarantee you within 5 minutes, 4 people will tell you, oh, that's a such and such. I had a problem and it did not look like a hornworm. I had this weird poop at the bottom of my tomato plant, and my first thought was, oh, I gotta have hornworms. But then I'm looking at this and I'm like, the leavings don't look like anything like a hornworm, and I really don't see one. I sat there and stared at this sucker for forever. So I took a picture of it, came back in, and I posted it. And then sure enough, one of them said, that really does look like hornworm stuff. It's probably just a really small hornworm. I'm like, all right. So I went back out and I sat there and I stared and, moved the plants around and looked and looked and looked and looked. And then finally I found it. And it was a hornworm. It was just one that was 1.5 inches long. It was super tiny, and it had eaten the whole bottom of my tomato plant. And I was like, son of a gun. I never thought it was a hornworm, because the damage was slightly different and the leavings didn't look anything like a hornworm poop. So, but the gardeners directed me. And so other gardeners and other homesteaders are going to be your best resource. And there are a ton of homesteading groups. I will say that some are better than others. I've found, I'm sure that's true of anything, but I'm part of several homesteading groups. And, unless you have a really good admin, a lot of the stuff that gets posted in some of these groups is almost borderline spammy. So just join a whole bunch of them and then remove yourself from the ones that are pretty terrible. That's what I did. It's the only way around it. There are in-person groups too. But everybody's so busy these days that sometimes just connecting electronically is the easiest route. So, and it's also the quickest to troubleshoot things. If you're having problems with an animal or your grass or your garden or whatever, or trying to build something, somebody has been there before you. and it's a great resource. to be able to get that instant information. Because sometimes when you're searching for an answer, you don't know that the right keyword to use. And having someone that can look at a picture and answer you, they can tell you what the name of whatever it is. And then, instantly you can find a million resources for it on the internet. But if you didn't know what that was, that search term, you would be up the creek, So I'm going to go ahead and conclude this because it is getting kind of long. I will put my short list of homesteading skills on the show notes, as well as all my sources. And I hope you guys have a great day. It's going to be really warm here again, but not as bad as it has been, and I will take that. All right, guys, have a good one. I'll talk to you later. Bye. And that, my friends, was the Farm Station Podcast. Please see our website, farmstation.com, for the show notes, sources, and resources to help you on your adventure. And we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.